guys, I'm here in Portugal for the Maia Chess Open. This is actually Portugal's biggest chess tournament and it's my first time playing here. It's my first over-the-board tournament since Reykjavik in March-April time, so that's a 5-month break between over-the-board tournaments. This is a 9-round Swiss with a time control of 90 minutes plus 30 seconds with an additional 30 minutes at the 40th move. And there is an accelerated pairing system for the first 5 rounds, which means that the top half of players have an extra fake point, which will then be removed later, but it basically just means that grandmasters aren't playing unrated players and people like me are not playing grandmasters. In round 1, as usual, I had the black pieces. I somehow always seem to start tournaments with the black pieces no matter what. And I was playing someone around 200 points higher rated than me. My opponent was actually a 13-year-old boy and he asked me if my flag was Jamaica. So just in case this was unclear, it's not Jamaica. He plays e4. I saw actually online that he plays a sideline in the French. I was very lucky to find his account because this is a weird sideline. Pretty much no one plays it. I've never had it in Classical and I very rarely get it on Blitz Online. So this is a sideline with bishop to d3, which is essentially a very unchallenging sideline because you take, and after knight f6, the bishop must drop back to f3, and the point is at some point we will win this bishop for a knight. This bishop can be really scary in the French, especially with the queen in like a queen-bishop battery, especially in the advance and stuff like that when white does a kingside attack, but here it's really not scary at all, and I knew this line because I spent 5 minutes prepping. Basically, my opponent plays what is the main line of this sideline. I remembered the theory, thankfully. And I knew that after any kind of series of moves, either knight c3 or knight to g3 or whatever, that my main move was going to be e5. And that is because this French basically is very different to a normal French. So in the normal French, as I'm sure you guys know, we play for the c5 push, and this is our main pawn break. But actually in this French, we go for the e5 push, which is usually not possible in the normal French. And that's just another reason why you can see that this variation is not that challenging, because actually it allows black to resolve the problem of the c8 bishop, which is usually black's worst piece. This e5 pawn break, definitely the way to go, and it is the best move here. So it was always in prep, and bishop g5 was also still prep. I saw that this was a very common try. I saw that h6 was also very necessary, and I thought it was very thematic to play g5. I didn't want to play g5 right away because it didn't seem totally necessary, and actually it's slightly better to play rook e8 first, which is what I did. Basically, the point is there is no knight to b5 because this traps the bishop after g5, and bishop to g3 and e4. So as we can see, the white bishop here has no squares available to it. It will just be captured and we would win a piece. So that's why I'm not afraid of knight to b5. Actually, here I thought that white would play knight to e4 and I would have to play bishop back to e7, and we would essentially just have a series of trades on f6. This is also not super challenging and it would simplify the position. But my opponent didn't want to go for this. Instead, my opponent played this move, bishop to d5, which I really didn't understand why he would want to play that. Yes, if I let him, he can go back to b3, but I'm not going to let him go back to b3. So instead, I played g5. I did briefly look at a5, trying to place for c6 and maybe trap the bishop on the side of the board, but there's nothing forcing. So here I can simply play g5, break the pin, and capture on d5. Here, I was quite happy to have the bishop pair. I was a little bit concerned about potential king safety issues, but because there is no light squared bishop, it should be okay. And unfortunately for me, I'm just not familiar with these positions where we push the kingside pawns when we've castled and there is like an open board. I play very few open games, like even e4, e5, I play the Spanish, it's often like semi-closed. So I did not really know that the best move here would be f5, so I did not play f5. But I think that this was a problem in the game because I had a couple opportunities to play f5 and it just would have given me a clearer plan, and that was kind of the issue, as I didn't really have a clear plan available to me. I just kind of got my pieces to good squares, but it wasn't a good substitute for a plan. So I didn't play f5. I played c6 because I thought that knight to f6 there was maybe some stress with the trades here in the middle, but after knight to e3 I was actually right that we cannot play knight to f6 here because you simply lose a piece. After captures, queen takes queen, rook takes, we can see that the defender of the bishop has been deflected. So this would be losing for black. You have to be a little bit careful. The game overall was quite sharp. I played queen f6, which is the best move. So she is guarding kind of these light squares because, as you can see, we haven't been able to get our light squared bishop developed just yet, but we have good control of these light squares, anticipating h6 as a weakness, potentially if knight g4 or knight f5 had been allowed, but it's not a big deal here. If knight g4, we can just attack the knight with queen to e6, and the knight will have to go somewhere else probably, or it will get kicked away later. And so my opponent didn't bother playing that, and instead he played captures. I personally think that capturing here made life very easy for me because I can just take the pawn and I get to develop my pieces. So I wanted to take with the knight instead of the bishop because I want this bishop on c8 to become an active piece. And now you can see that it's doing a great job controlling all of these light squares, and it's basically developed even though it's still on c8. I just need to connect the rooks. And as you can see, white's queen and rooks kind of inactive, and these knights are not really doing anything. My opponent played knight to c3, so he is setting up a one-move threat of knight to e4, and honestly it felt kind of clumsy the way he had to maneuver the knights. I think it's just because it's an open board. Bishops are so much better in these open positions. Here I was able to find bishop to f8, which is the best move because obviously in anticipation of knight e4 we must move either the queen or bishop. Otherwise, we will lose the bishop pair. And we can actually just allow knight to e4 because after queen g6, which is what happened in the game, the knight has no good defender. We don't want to play f3 here as white, so the knight has to go back to d2. So it feels like white has wasted some time with the knights. And here again, I should have gone for this f5 idea, but it was so alien to me and I was so unfamiliar with this kind of position. So here I should have gone for the f5 idea again. Of course, we are just threatening this simple pawn fork, but basically forcing the trade and having the two knights against the two bishops. Obviously, in this entirely open position, the two bishops are preferable. We would have an advanced pawn structure here on the king side, and we just have a great position. But again, I was just kind of reticent to push this last pawn in front of my king because I'm just so not used to being able to do that in an open position. And again, the reason it's possible is because white has no light squared bishop. So you can see how this opening is actually just like not giving white anything, and black has a really nice position. So unfortunately I didn't play that. I decided to play bishop back to c5, which might look strange, but it's actually okay. Basically, if white goes for anything on the bishop, yet again, we have nice kind of tactical shots. We can play knight to g4. This is hanging with a fork, so they have to move the queen. And I can also consider bishop moves, getting the bishop out with tempo maybe, or just having a great position in general. So I was very happy with my bishop on c5 too. It didn't need to stay on f8 forever, but I kind of wanted it to go to f8 before also to have the option to go to g7. After knight to c4, I was very, very happy with the position. In post-game analysis, my opponent said that he thought my knight was really annoying and it was stopping all of his plans. I felt like my knight was, yeah, he was in a nice spot, but he has no prospects. He can't go anywhere. All of the squares that he could go to are being controlled by enemy pieces. So because he's already on his best square, like, I'm okay to trade this because my bishops are going to be much, much better here, my bishop pair. So I was very happy with this trade. I think Stockfish agrees with me. Now all I have to do is develop my light squared bishop to either e6 or f5, and both of them basically come with a few little like things to calculate. So bishop to e6, there is knight here with a tempo on the queen, and I just wasn't sure what to do here. If queen f5, queen h7, queen g7, they're all good, but I didn't know. I decided to play instead bishop to f5 because after knight to e5, I felt like I had good control of like all of these diagonals across the middle of the board. Like you can see that my queen is controlling this, my bishop is controlling this, and this bishop as well. Like they're very, very nice pieces. And then we finally get the rooks in, and now you can see that I have every piece in the game activated. So I have great pieces. I have the bishop pair on an open board, and white doesn't really have any threats. But as you can see, I'm down 10 minutes on the clock. It's move 22. And I have 19 minutes, which means I have to make 18 moves before time control. So I have basically 1 minute per move, which is not very long for a classical game to keep the standard of moves high. So I started to become a bit stressed. And obviously this is a problem. You don't want to be stressed in chess. I did anticipate queen to f3. I did not play for this capture because after here, I didn't think that this was worth calculating. Apparently there are a few different things that can be played here, either this queen h7, but it felt very uncomfortable, like dealing with the pin and the bishops. But there's also a crazy tactical line with bishop to d4. And then queen takes f7. So this is really crazy. Forgive me for not seeing this. I'm not convinced you guys would have seen this. This is the stockfish line. It's totally crazy. And then I take here or something. I can even play king to f7 apparently. Sorry, king to f7. But like this is silly. I didn't calculate this. So instead of grabbing the pawn, I played bishop to f6, which frees my queen if she wants to move away from f7, keeps things safe. And yet again, white plays a one move threat with the knight. So here, as you can see, I am starting to lose time on the clock. Like my opponent has more time than me, and this is where the time difference actually starts to get bigger. I was quite stressed here. I was looking at stuff like g4, but I didn't feel like this did anything for me. Like I don't actually want to trade the bishops, so why would I do that? But I wasted time calculating it. I played bishop to d5, which is the best move, but like I should have played it instantly. Shouldn't have wasted time calculating, and then bishop back to b6 to keep an eye on f2. I still have a great position yet again, but it's not clear what plans I should make. It was honestly not that easy of a position to play. My opponent trades the rooks and plays bishop to e5. He told me in post-game analysis he thought he was winning a pawn. After queen h7 and queen to d7, he thought he could take here on b7, but there is obviously a really, really big problem with that, is that I'm threatening checkmate, and I would just win a piece here. That's not possible. My opponent instead had to play queen back to h3, and I felt like everything was going my way. I have such a beautiful position, and then I, for no apparent reason, spent 4 minutes finding queen g6. So my clock goes from 8 to 4, and like my pieces are all great, and it looks like a really silly move, but it's the best move on the board. Queen g6 is the only move to keep an edge for black, but I can't afford to spend 4 minutes finding it. So here I just really struggled to switch on to time trouble mode. What my coach said, and what obviously you hear all the time, is perfect is the enemy of good. Clearly, I have a problem with this. This is something I struggle with because I want to find the best move, but I'm wasting my time. So white goes for this again. I should have played queen to e6, but I was stressed about discoveries, and I felt like if I calculated every possible line, I would flag. So I didn't go for this. I just repeated, but now he can take on b7 because obviously this hangs the queen. I cannot play queen to e4. And now I'm stressed. I was considering playing for queen to f5, but for some reason I got spooked and I didn't play it. So I just started to go crazy and I played c5 with the tempo and the queen. The queen came back to e7. I played c4, and as you can see, I have 2 minutes on the clock and my opponent has 13. And this is just very, very, very poor time management. So I've gone from having a slight edge to my opponent having a slight edge, just because I was poorly managing my time. And here I thought my opponent was going to have to play like some knight move, and then I would either have threats with queen to f5 and like threats here as well with queen to g4. Instead, my opponent played bishop to d4, which is a move I didn't see. And It says I have 2 minutes on the clock. I distinctly remember having like 1. But I looked very, very briefly at Queen D6, which is actually the only move to not be worse here. I didn't realize I needed to play it because I didn't realize there was a threat here. So I completely blundered with in my time trouble. I played bishop to a 5 with a tempo on the rook, but there's mate in 3. I simply just did not see mate in 3, and that's okay because it was midnight. The round started almost 1 hour late. It was meant to start at 7 p.m. It started closer to 8. I was exhausted before the round started. I hadn't had dinner. It was all a little bit messy, honestly. I was yawning, honestly, through the second half of the game. I think with 1 minute on the clock, I can miss obviously a checkmate threat. The remedy to this is to not get into such bad time trouble. But I did get into bad time trouble. I think totally was a little bit rusty from not having played OTB, but I think in general time trouble is something that I've been struggling with for a while in like all time controls. That's one of the reasons I'm so bad at blitz. But yeah, obviously I would have played Queen D6 if I had realized that was a mate threat. But I did not realize the urgency. I think sometimes it's really hard to switch when you've been having the edge to being the one who's being attacked. And I think, yeah, basically, if I had played F5 all the way back, I would have had much, much clearer plans for the game. So if we go all the way back here to move 18, I think that a move like F5 would have been able to provide me with much, much clearer plans, because here I have a clear kingside initiative as well as the 2 bishops. And so this would have been a much simpler position to kind of organize my pieces around, because at least I know where on the board I'm playing. Whereas the position I got to, yeah, I had great active pieces, but there's not like a simple way to play this position when you have like less than 1 minute for each move and you have to make time control. I think if my opponent had traded queens here, obviously I would have been very happy going into this endgame, and I think I could have very easily made time control. And obviously this is like the reason he didn't do it, because he should pressure me on the clock and he shouldn't go into an endgame where I have the 2 bishops. I would have been much, much more comfortable in this position, clearly, and it would have been easier to play quick, good moves because there's less of a threat from heavy pieces. In this game, I honestly didn't feel like my opponent was like significantly better than me. He's 200 points higher, but I felt like I played a good game and I felt honestly like I had good chances. I did have one missed win in this game, which is that here after the original Queen D7, instead of playing Rook D8 and forcing the queen back to H3, I had this exchange sacrifice. And I did look very briefly at this, and my opponent did too, and I'm still a little bit better. It's -1, but I couldn't like convince myself this was worth it, especially with the knight and the queen that close to my king. I was a bit spooked, but actually there's a better continuation that I didn't see. And that continuation, sacking another piece just after you've sacked the exchange. So sack my bishop and then queen takes with check. So we actually win the piece back. Obviously I'm still down the exchange, but I have the pawns, which is the important thing. Clearly, like having 6 pawns versus 4 and a bishop should be good, but it's still an endgame to play. Like it's still an endgame to play. And I would have been on move 32 here. So I would have started to make 8 moves before time control, but obviously this position would have been much better than the position I had. It is actually winning. Neither me nor my opponent saw this. This feels pretty stockfishy. Maybe if I had had more than 10 minutes, I would have spent longer calculating this exchange sacrifice, but I clearly was already having problems with wasting time calculating things. This would have been a brilliant move, and unfortunately I didn't play it. I'm getting chances, you know, against higher rated players. Yet again, this is a recurring theme of my tournaments. I just need to be able to convert these, and there's only a matter of time. Unfortunate loss in round 1, but it's kind of expected when you're playing up, and I haven't been playing that much chess. Haven't played classical in almost 6 months. We will see how round 2 goes. Round 2 is at 4 p.m. local time, and most of the rounds are at 4 p.m. local time. There are just a couple rounds at 10 a.m., so you'll have to check out the schedule if you want to watch those live. Otherwise, you can wait and check out my recaps. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below. Wish me luck in round 2 because it's only 1 hour away, and oops, I need to go now to set up for the round. So bye guys, I will see you after the next round, and yeah, have a good one.